Hello, and welcome to episode number 144 of A Mic on the Podium with me, Michael Seal. Today, I conduct a conversation with a conductor who was born in Bulgaria, but has spent most of his life living in Italy and Germany. Originally a pianist, he switched to conducting, studying with Gianluigi Gelmetti and Jorma Panela, and is probably best known for being the founder of the orchestra he still conducts today, the Mannheim Philharmonic Symphony Orchestra. It's a great pleasure to welcome Boian Videnoff. Boian, I have a poster on my wall which tells me that the last time we saw each other face to face was April 2007. How are you? You look very well.
I'm great, Mike. So nice to see your face again. It's really crazy. 17 years?
I know, it's flown by, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I will let the listener know why we met 17 years ago in St. Petersburg in Russia. But for now, we must go back and initially to Bulgaria before you moved to Italy and Germany. But initially, you were born in Bulgaria to musical parents. Could you tell us, I mean, obviously, if you're born to musical parents, music's there from the very beginning. But how did it really come into your life, and what were your first instruments?
My mom is a violinist. My dad used to be a singer, and therefore those also two instruments that I had early on. I was singing a lot, and I was playing the violin. Then, kind of a rebellion against my mother brought me to play the piano and the oboe and playing jazz and staying far away from classical for a while. But somehow we had a good friend. Maybe you remember Marcello Viotti, the conductor, who passed unfortunately pretty young, 50 years old, who was the father of actually Renzo Viotti, who is now doing very well in our industry. And he was a very good friend of our family, and I was a kid. And somehow that inspired me a lot, that man waving his hands. I didn't understand anything at that age about it, but somehow I found it inspiring. And later, the more I understood what that profession is about, the more fascinating I found it. So yeah, this is how I got to conducting.
Did you, I mean, at the beginning, I've asked this of people with musical parents. Were your parents at all pushy about your mum saying you must learn the violin? Or did they just let you grow up like any other child and make you, let you choose, allow you to have a sort of a normal childhood, and then there might be a day when little Boyan says, "Mummy, I want to learn the violin. Will you teach me?" How was it?
My mom was pushed a lot by her dad.
Right.
So she had an aversion against that kind of parenting.
Yeah.
And that led to her giving me actually quite a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
My dad is a singer, so anyway, that's a breed of their own in a way. For him was important that I do something, but whether it's music or not, I don't think that was that important. But he just wanted me to be serious about something. And my mom, she kind of wanted to give me the freedom to develop as a child, which ultimately led to the fact that I started practicing and really working seriously quite late, because it's normal if they don't push you while you're a kid. And very few kids have this intrinsic wish to work alone and have this discipline. I think, especially in today's world where distractions are so many
Yeah.
opportunities. It's a different thing if you're born in the Soviet Union and everything around you is gray in a way, and music is actually the escape from a really bad reality around you. Then you can really dig into something like this, and this is also why we see in those times artists emerging, or in such circumstances. But in today's time, I grew up in Germany, or beginning in Italy, so it was quite open for me. And my parents did not push a lot. So I had a hard time to catch up then when I was a young man.
It's funny, I have interviewed quite a few conductors who grew up in that Soviet system. And whilst, none of us would agree on the politics of that system, all of those conductors have said how incredible the music education system was, because there was money thrown at it, because there was, as you said, there was little else to do. It was a grey world, and the colour came from the music. And they've all said how much they benefited from studying and learning about music during that totalitarianism sort of system. I wonder whether, I mean, maybe it's too deep a topic for this podcast, but I wonder how on earth we can ever get to a world where music becomes that important to to be educated now? Because I know in the UK it's not. It's dribbled and dwindled away over the last, 30, 40 years to the point where it seems to only be now for those who can afford to pay to go to special schools. Yeah, it's a shame.
That's a real problem that you're talking about, because we're seeing this. Somehow we as humanity don't learn much. The moment we're doing well, we think the arts are given. And we've seen it also during COVID. The moment that things are not going so well, the first thing we run to is the arts, to find comfort. In wars, people start singing. It's interesting how the moment we feel good, we think we can do without it, and the moment we are really in a bad situation, it's the first thing we need to nurture our souls and our hopes. And I think that today's world is so digital already, and so full of distractions. A video game is so much more interesting than looking at a piece of sheet music and trying to figure out what to do with the fingers on the piano. So it requires maybe new approaches for children also to get involved into that, because only if you really get passionate about it, only then will you develop that certain character traits that are needed to really stick with it, and that ultimately will benefit your entire being, whether you become a musician or not. At the end, it doesn't matter, because if you are someone who's self-disciplined, someone who really follows through on some project they start, that will benefit you in any way in your life. But in order to get there, you need to be passionate first, and becoming passionate about something needs also, something that this initial spark.
Well, I think we'll come to the initial spark when we later on talk about your orchestra in Mannheim that you founded and started. I will add as a postscript to what you just said, how much I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. Yet have to say that in the UK during COVID, loads of people went to culture and the arts. But actually, the people who got no or little or no financial support from the government during COVID were the musicians. And it's a passionate subject of mine. And maybe this year I'm going to come up with a plan to make the world realize that music doesn't just grow on trees and appear from somewhere. I've got an idea for a National No Music Day where music is banned from all media, just to highlight the fact that this thing doesn't just appear. People need to be educated in it, and if they weren't educated in maths, there wouldn't be people designing and building anything. So this music doesn't just grow on trees, and as you said, when we need it, when we're at our lowest ebb, people just go to it and grab it and consume it. But are they really thinking about where it comes from? I'm going to get off my soapbox now, Boyan, because otherwise this will be a politics podcast and not a music podcast.
No, but just to conclude on that thought, because I think it's really important. The American Association for Psychology, they have made a big study about it, and they found that children who actively play an instrument, not sing, but really play an instrument, those children are 1 year, one academic year ahead of their peers who don't. This is an incredible finding that shows how much playing an instrument develops the two halves of our brains, connects them, and makes basically us more intelligent in many ways. And it's a shame that music education is not so central right now in our educational systems. You're absolutely right.
Well, I agree with all of that. We're going to stick with education because you eventually went on to study piano at the Mannheim University. Seems Mannheim was a place that crops up in your life quite a bit.
I mean, I studied piano, but always already with the thought that I want to be a conductor. So Mannheim, to me, studying piano in Mannheim was more of I had found my teacher in conducting. I first was in Berlin, young student. I thought I had a teacher that I liked, but then I moved on. And then I found by chance Gianluigi Gelmetti, who at that time was chief conductor in Sydney in the symphony orchestra, and in Rome in the opera. And I really fell in love with his music making, with his understanding of music. He was an incredible pedagogue and musician, first of all. He had studied with Hans Warowski, with Franco Ferrara, and Cilbidake, so three really very different schools, and had to give so much. He was a quite tough, strong character. I say was because he passed just 2 years ago. And it was a very special experience for me when it was an impact. I coming from a musical family where I had the feeling at that time that everything is easy and, like the ocean is deep to my knees. And then this man kind of taught me, boy, you're so far from reality. And that was exactly what I needed. Someone who ground me in a way and at the same time teach me the real values and fight with me over little details in the score that I would just superficially ignore. And so it was a fantastic time for me. And I had found this teacher and he was not teaching at an academy. And so I thought, okay, but some academic path I should do. So I decided I'm going to study piano and do all the composition things. I took all the composition classes in Mannheim and I had all the possibility there. At the same time, I was quite free knowing that I will never really care about becoming a great pianist. I was free to travel a lot and follow him and follow his productions and spend time with him and then study with him in Siena in summer always. We had pretty long periods of two months with orchestra. That was a fantastic. So yeah, studying piano was always with the idea of that I actually want to be a conductor.
So let me get some chronology here. For instance, the first time any orchestra appears on Wikipedia, and again, Wikipedia, dear listeners, is often wildly wrong. But it says you became the permanent guest conductor of the Varna Philharmonic Orchestra in Bulgaria. It's on the Black Sea in 2006. But we didn't meet until 2007. So when did you start learning with Gelmeti?
Well, I don't think that's 100% correct what you found in Wikipedia. I was conducting Varna regularly.
Yeah.
And that was back then, the director of the orchestra my father was back then in Bulgaria, a very important singer, and they were friends. And my father told him, I'm a conductor, or starting to be a conductor, and he felt like supporting always young people. So he invited me. I did well the first concert. I think it was Beethoven's 7th or something. And then I started coming back every year there for a while. And we met in 2007, and I think I had already conducted the first time in Varna. That was my very first, let's say, engagement as a professional, but let's say professional engagement as a non-professional conductor.
And did you start with Gelmeti after we met in 2007?
12 was my 5th year, so 12, 11, 10, 9, 7, 8, I started with him.
Yeah.
7.
So let's get to 2007. So I'm interested to know why you were there in St. Petersburg. I know why I was there. I'd started conducting, and Sakari Oromo was the music director of the CBSO, and I had been already in 2007. I'd been 2 years their assistant conductor with the CBSO. But Sakari rightly said to me, look, you ought to go and have some lessons and tidy up. He didn't have time, so he sent me to his teacher, Jorma Panela, and we were there for 10 days, 2 weeks. So I know why I was there. What made you go and seek or sit at the feet of the great conducting Yoda, who's still with us, well into his 90s? What made you go
Are you still in touch with him?
I'm not in touch with him, no. But maybe it would be wonderful to try and get him on the podcast, but how in-depth the conversation would be, I don't know. As you remember, he is a man of few words, but often in many different languages at once. Why did you go?
Well, pretty much for the same reasons as you did. I mean,
Yeah.
I was young, just starting out, and back then his name was, of course, mentioned everywhere. You had, Esa-Pekka and many who came from that school. So for me, it was pretty normal back then I was looking for where could I study, with whom should I study. So this is how I reached out to Jorma, and it's strange. I really fell in love in the way he was treating certain things. I mean, he was not someone who would work with you on interpretation, right?
No.
He's someone who would ask you, what do you want? Fortes, forzato. Okay, then do like this, and whether that forzato makes sense or not, if you had a crazily stupid idea, he'd just go for it,
Yeah.
But though later, if you get to know him a bit more, then he would actually start, if he would care about you, then he would also start questioning a few ideas, but it's rare, I would say. And that was great for starting out, for understanding the technique and what what it matters, or how much you can change sound with technique and thoughts. And yeah, for me, it was a fantastic start with the Panula.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think those of us who were there, who were at a sort of level, so you'd already done your first professional engagement. I'd done 2 years as assistant with the CBSO. There were a couple of other guys there who'd done a few gigs, professional gigs. There were about 5 or 6 of us who were at that level. I think it was a wonderful technical sort of cleanup. It really taught us, well, if you want that, this is how you do it. Stop doing this, try and do this less, try and do this more. And you would learn as much from the video sessions afterwards with him teaching other people, maybe of a lesser technical ability. You would also watch as much watching him react to somebody else who was conducting it. We would all sit in the room and watch everybody else who was conducting. I remember vividly the first time Ken David Mazur conducted on that course, and we all turned around and went, "My God, he's just like his dad." Whether he still conducts just like his dad, I don't know. But it was fascinating to watch, how he taught to different people at different levels, and I learned more from watching him teaching the other people than maybe I did from him teaching me. Do you agree with that?
100%. I think actually learning from such classes, I think it's so important to have this class group learning. Gelmetti was doing the same. You were not allowed to miss a lesson of the others. And he actually so that he was notching it up a level, like you would not know when you have lesson with what you have lesson. So we had in Siena, we had a suitcase full of scores. Usually it was all Beethoven sonatas, all Brahms symphonies, all Brahms symphonies, Sacre, an opera. It was just full of stuff. And then he'd say, Videnoff, Brahms, terza, second movement. And you just start looking for the score and grab it and run up. That kind of stress situation to have a huge repertoire ready, which is impossible at that age, especially. And also, in a way of now you have to deliver. That was, of course, a great lesson, but you not learn much that moment. You're under stress, you're under adrenaline, you somehow swim to survive. But seeing others in that moment, you'd see all the problems come out like fungi, because in the stress, it's where we actually are the weakest in a way, or all our weaknesses come out very evidently. So this is something where I found amazing to just look, and then he would teach, and he would really pinpoint those problems and really go in depth into those problems. And if you had a bit of a character to withstand his rough way, Gelmetti's, I'm talking about Gelmetti, then you'd learn a lot from him. Other people sometimes would say he's too rough, but if you really put it aside and just think about what matters, I think one can learn a lot. And I know that other important pianists, for example, like Fleischer, was doing the same. In his studio, you had to be at all the lessons of everyone. So I think that's where you learn the most, when you listen to other people's lessons and you're not in the stress situation, therefore can calmly analyze what's happening.
Well, I mean, it's, to use an analogy that's popped into my head, we often say that our brains are like sponges. If you're only absorbing the water that is given to you, on an individual basis, you can absorb it. That's fine. But actually, if your sponge is thrown into the sea, it's going to absorb so much more water than you can ever take on board. But you might absorb stuff that you were never going to be told on a one-to-one basis. I'm thinking about watching somebody else conduct, and they use a turn of phrase, or they use a sentence, or they use one word, and the teacher stops them and says, "No, you cannot use that word." Well, that word might not have been in your vocabulary. It might end up in your vocabulary in 20 years, and then you use it and you've got it wrong. But little things like that are fascinating, aren't they? That, by watching somebody else, I remember watching people conducting that week 17 years ago nearly, and thinking, even now, I still use those, or don't use those words.
Yes, yeah, 100% agreed.
So at some point, you leave the education of both Panola and Gelmetti and start guest conducting, I'm assuming, around the place. But in 2009, you started your orchestra, the Mannheim Philharmonic Symphony Orchestra. You founded it then. First of all, why? I mean, obviously, the answer for most of us conductors is, well, if I start my own orchestra, then at least I've got some conducting. That's a cynical view. But why there as well? And what were the initial reasons why you started it?
I think there were several reasons. First reason was, as you said, experience. And that came on a different, like on different levels that conclusion came to my head. Like I was 2006, I was invited to conduct the students' orchestra in China on tour from German music, Hochschulen, university schools, many different musicians telephoned together, and we just went to China, and we were like 2 weeks there and just played 6 concerts. It was more a vacation than a tour.
Yeah.
It was really fun. And there I was the youngest. I was 19-year-old. And I met all those musicians who were in their 20s, late 20s, some in their 30s, and all describing the same problem. We're either not invited to auditions, or if we're invited, we just get out in the first round, never pass the second, generally super hard to get a job. Like when we started studying music, we didn't think it would be like that. And if you look back in the 70s, I mean, especially after the war here in Germany, if you could play the double bass, orchestras would say, you can play the bass, you have an instrument, come play in the orchestra.
Yeah.
Now it's not like that, right? Now you have 300 people applying for a flute position. It's crazy. So that situation showed me, oh, wow, something needs to be done. And I need experience. You guys need experience. Why don't we do an orchestra? This was a very naive thought. And this was actually what led me to start it. And I first thought, I'm going to call it Beethoven Sinfonietta because I always loved Beethoven. And then I thought, but no, if they have to take us serious when you apply then and you say, I'm the solo flutist of the Mannheim Philharmonic, it should be some, like professionally sounding orchestra. So this is how I came to the idea to say, okay, let's call it Mannheim Philharmonic. And why Mannheim? Because my mom was professor in Mannheim, and I was young student, piano student in Mannheim, and I had this connection to that city. And I was seeing that in that city, there is a lot of financial possibilities because there are a lot of sponsors, I mean, famous, important companies, German industries there. And it's a big area. It's with Heidelberg and Ludwigshafen, it's over 1.4 million people or something like this. So it's pretty big, has a lot of culture, and it has a theater orchestra and it has a chamber orchestra. And that city doesn't have a symphony orchestra. So I thought, why not doing that there? Again, super naive thought. And I just, started it like that, without having any idea of how hard it would be and how much actually effort it would take. And maybe that also naivete helped me to go through this initial hurdles, which are unbelievably difficult. I mean, when we started it, my parents had a Mercedes A-class car. You remember those? That
Yes.
were falling over in the tests of driving turns. So that was pretty high, and we could fit a double bass in it. So I would drive the double basses to rehearsal, and we would change every day the rehearsal place because we didn't have a rehearsal place. So I'd put the double bass, drive one, then go back next. My dad had a Chrysler Voyager, and he had built from wood like a ramp, so that we could push in the timpani. Were just given to us for those weeks, just as a friendly gesture from the orchestra of my mom, who was a radio symphony orchestra in Saarbrücken, and they would just give us a timpani for a week, and it always started as a effort of many people supporting each other. The musicians were sleeping either in homes of other musicians in Mannheim, or people who would have empty apartments would give us just the apartment so that people could sleep there. It was unbelievable with what a small budget we managed to organize an entire season. I think the first season we had like maybe 150,000 euro, 100,000 euro, something like this, and we organized 8 projects. It was insane, insane amount of manual work and doing everything. And then over time it got professional, more professional, and professional means more expensive, basically. Everything.
Exactly. So did you get sponsorship, or how did you initially fund it at the beginning? And even though you were obviously going to be talking with your friends you'd been to China with about coming and joining your orchestra, at some point, I'm assuming you had to then officially start auditioning people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
We were
I mean,
really
maybe at
serious.
the very beginning.
We were really serious about it. We made posters. Like, I have, let's say, I think one of my really qualities is that I can dream up things, let's say. So I can, like, when I have a vision, I can really work hard for it to come to fruition. And I, because I had that childhood we were talking about, I was, like in my childhood, I was doing computers too, and I was building websites for fun. I even worked, did a internship at MediaMarkt for 2 weeks. So I always like had a broad interest in technology too, and therefore I could do the whole website of the orchestra. It looked like it exists, although it didn't yet, and I could save lots of money and things like that by doing things myself, and that helped us in the beginning totally, and helped in a way to create all of this that actually was in the beginning just in my head, but it looked pretty existing already, and that helped me when I was reaching out to people. I mean, how it started is we started asking people in Mannheim if we could present the idea, and so by chance we presented it to someone who was a former um, C-level at Deutsche Bank in the area, and then he liked it and he said, "Oh, you should present it to this guy." So we spent, with a friend of mine, we spent like, I think, few months in living rooms of people, telling them the story of why we're doing this, and bit by bit we came to the people who actually had the money to support it. So billionaire from the region then said, "I think it's nice that you guys are trying. Here you have 5,000 euros." So we took the 5,000. Now he's one of the biggest sponsors of the orchestra, and helping us to get money from the city and the government. But it started with 5,000 euro from him. And then this is how we came. I remember a pivotal moment because I was booking the hall, and the hall in Mannheim is pretty big and pretty expensive. And the guy who was running it did not have much understanding for us young people trying to do something. So he said, "Well, if you book it, you have to pay it." And sure, but like, what if we can't? He said, "Well, there are fees. You have to pay at least half. You have to pay then anyway." Okay, fine. And then I asked my parents. I called them and said, "Guys, like," and they're for sure not rich. My mom is a concert master, and my dad unfortunately had an injury and then did not sing for many years. So we were total normal. I mean, concert masters earn well, but not anything crazy. So I asked them, "Will you have my back if it goes wrong?" And my mom said, "How much are we talking about?" And I said, "I think the signature that I have to give is like 40,000 euros, something like this." And she said, "Oof." And he said, "Well, go for it," And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna sign it." And I signed that moment. And the moment I signed, that kind of put even more pressure to make it happen. And somehow, yeah, that was a pivotal moment. And I remember when I then sat at the Mannheim Versicherung, which is an important company, insurance company for instruments actually, and old timers, all those kind of things. And they're sitting in Mannheim. And back then, the CEO of that company was a big music lover, and he loved the idea. And he said, I'm gonna give you 30,000 euro, and I'm gonna get you other 15 support from a city, basically. And this is how I remember how I had tears, because until then we did not yet have any sponsor, just those 5,000 from this one. And that was the pivotal moment where I knew, okay, it's happening. It's happening. And we started it, and we did auditions all summer. We made like publicity in all music schools in Germany, or high schools, universities, and people applied, and this new orchestra. And And it was a very, very exciting time. We had like musicians from all the major orchestras coming and sitting in the jury. It was really like done with lots of, like spirit of professional approach. And then the first project happened with Dvorak, New World Symphony, which I had conducted already a few times, so I felt more secure with that piece. And it went well. We had a standing ovation in the hall, and this is how then from that moment we played every month a concert. And yeah, it was fun.
And so that was 2009, and it's still going now. And so I think you said that you had 8 concerts or 8 projects in that first
Yeah,
initial season.
one we had to cancel, and we had to pay the cancellation fee.
Mm.
But yeah, one we had to cancel, so it was 7 in the first.
And so in a season now, I mean, we're probably halfway through your season 23, 24. How many concerts do you put on now?
Well, usually it was before or during COVID, we had every month one. Now, since the new reality of inflation hit, and literally everything became almost double for us,
Mm.
expenses. We're right now, this season is a kind of a light season, and we have just 4 major projects, which is very sad. But we're trying to, see what we can do with the current expenses. This is what we can do. But there is a big amount of expenses, just, personnel and all those kind of things, which they're actually made for a big operation, but we don't have yet the money for the same kind of operation we had. We need now 100,000 for a concert. It's crazy. And yeah, so this is the new reality, and we're trying to get back to every month.
Good. Well, I wish you well, because until COVID, it seemed to be a very great success story. As we said before we pressed, or before I pressed record on the interview, we've not actually seen each. We nearly saw each other. I was staying in Mannheim and had a concert in Heidelberg, but ended up actually conducting the concert, if you remember, because Andres Nelsons went.
Remember that?
Yeah, so we were going to meet that day, and I ended up having to learn how to conduct La Mer instead, on a few hours' notice. But we keep in touch via the medium of Facebook and websites and social media and whatever else. And so, yeah, I've been watching what you've been doing there, and it's until COVID, it seemed to have been a roaring success, and I hope it comes back.
Thank you. But well, also now it is. I mean, it's wonderful. We, over this time, things developed. We had, I think Misha Maisky was the really first. Oh no, actually Johannes Moser was the very first big name in the first season who agreed to come without any fee and played, and was a great support. But then I think Misha Maisky was the next really, really, really big supporter then, who played since then many times with us. And then it started, people started talking. Soloists started talking, and Babayan came. Babayan told Marta then now comes regularly. Now Danil is coming next season, and like it really expands the circle of soloists who are loving to come to Mannheim. And I really think it's a very special place, because music making in the orchestra there is not like everywhere else. There's something really special about it. Now it's not anymore just a training orchestra. Like there are actually concert masters and solo section leaders from other orchestras who love the project. They come, and I don't want to use the name tutors, because they're not. They're more like colleagues. They're colleagues. They're playing together, and you have this amazing group of young, unexperienced, but super motivated, or very experienced, but searching maybe from some freshness to escape from their real lives in a way. And this creates an incredible group of, people who love music and are there just for the fun of doing it. And then super openness, whatever ideas might sometimes crazy I might have, they follow it. They're ready to just do it. It's a total surrealistic situation, and totally spoiled as a conductor in a way, because when I'm conducting in Mannheim, I don't have the feeling that I have opposition, but more of a genuine love for what I suggest. And it's wonderful that I have that freedom and possibility to develop an interpretation. And that's unique when you guest conduct, you have to be much more diplomatic, and you have to see in certain situations what you can say, what you can't. You know exactly what it needs, but you cannot sometimes do that. And and here I can be totally myself. I just can say what I think, and we have a very nice way to work. And I think that the soloists feel that too. And so it's wonderful now having these amazing artists coming and joining us, sharing with us. Pinky, when he was there, Pinky Sukaman, he was just sharing with the orchestra. He was basically giving a masterclass to everyone. And I think those moments are really special when the soloists come and they see why those people are sitting there like this. This is very, very special and wonderful. And I want more of that. So I take your wish very seriously. I hope too that we can find the way to play more often.
In the meantime, and you've just touched on it quite well, actually, and mentioned things such as, how hard you can push when you guest conduct. In the meantime, you'll be guest conducting wherever you're invited to go. As you've just said, one has to sometimes be careful or think you need to be careful about what you say when you go to these places. Do you have any strategies or thought processes that you go through before you guest conduct, especially before you make a debut? Because we all have to do that. The speed dating that is a debut with an orchestra, where you put that beat down, you have no idea when the sound's going to come back, what's going to come back, how they're going to react. And normally people make a decision on you anywhere between the minute you've walked to the podium to within 15 minutes. Some people, I used to give them a day or so to see if they could accompany a soloist when I was an orchestral violinist. But, most people have made a decision. I remember one player deciding after the first note of Nielsen's Third Symphony that it was going to be an awful week. So your thoughts and strategies, when you go and guest conduct.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, guest conducting, because of all the things you mentioned. And strategy, I remember Gelmetti was always saying, you can't plan what you're gonna say, what you're gonna do a tavolino, like on the table. You can't plan it. And I live by that. I think it's true. Like, you can, of course, be prepared and know which places are tricky or what might need your attention, but you'll be surprised. In some orchestras, some things just work, and you should not, as you also were saying, should not lift the carpet if it's actually fine, because you might find then things which then take a lot of time cleaning. So you'd be surprised. Some things really work well. Others, where you never had a problem, have then issues. So having this spontaneity, I think it's super important in our profession. Just seeing what comes back and what is needed, because at the end we're there to serve. Even if it's our interpretation, but still we're there to serve them to be at their best in the performance. I think our goal is to make them understand the score in a way that they really can be free in it, knowing everything what's happening around them, and at the same time where you want them to go. I think that is our job in the rehearsals, and this is where guest conducting becomes hard, because sometimes you need to do a certain way of cleanup in an orchestra that might have some issues in, for example, culture of playing together. I think that's an important issue that actually many orchestras have, but they also have often a very strong ego in a way, or they think they're great, and which they actually are, but there are few things that need to be touched and spoken about, and also rehearsed in a certain way. And if you do that, that's gonna piss off somebody.
It's so true.
Or many people, maybe, maybe a third of them. And maybe this is the third that actually brings that orchestra down to that level, why it's needed. And then you need to choose your fights and decide whether it's worth it or not. And I don't know, actually, I can't give you an answer now, because I'm still young. Although now today's world, I'm considered a middle-aged conductor, and I think 36 is still very young for a conductor. And I for sure didn't yet figure out I know only one thing, that with the time passes, the more and more I care less about what people think about me. Um, so maybe that's the key to it. And maybe being yourself is the right thing, but I know that you cannot be yourself right away because people are gonna misunderstand it. I mean, this is the same thing also in, when you have a flirt approaching, you're also not yourself, right? In the beginning, it's all this kind of game of getting to know each other, and the more the other person knows you, the more the guards can fall, and the more you can open up as a personality without them misjudging you. And I think it's just the same, just super fast. It needs to happen within a few days with an orchestra, which is nearly impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, you reminded me of a story of a conductor I'd heard, and I was in a teaching situation, and somebody said to me, "Well, how would you have done it differently?" But the story I'd heard was that a young conductor went to a very very famous orchestra, and started tuning the woodwind in the rehearsal, which apparently upset this orchestra because as you mentioned, they've got big egos and whatever else. Um, and then somebody said to me, "Well, if it was out of tune, surely it's your job to tune it in the rehearsal." And I said, "Well, yes, but there are other ways of approaching it. It might have been better to have turned around and said, 'Look, I think there are some problems there, Woodwind. I'm sure you can hear it yourselves. But if I leave you 5 minutes at the end of the rehearsal, do you want to sort it out amongst yourselves?'" So by doing that, what you're showing is that you've got the ears and you spotted that it's out of tune, but you're giving them the option then, if they want to sort it out amongst themselves. If they then turn around and say, "Actually, would you mind doing it for us now?" Well, then that's fine. But an orchestra with an ego who might don't want to show their dirty laundry out in a rehearsal might well turn around and say, "Okay, great, leave us 5 minutes. We'll do it at the end, or we'll do it in the coffee break, or whatever it is." There are ways of showing that these things need rehearsing, but you don't actually have to do it in the hardest way possible, which is, right, I'm going to tune your woodwind section for you right now. That can, as you say, bruise or damage an ego that people might
Yeah.
have. And these are the problems we have, because unless you've got a tactic like that, you're always making snap decisions, aren't you? Right, I've got to fix this, or I'm not going to fix that because I think I'm going to start an argument. Well, there are ways that you can sort of suggest,
Yeah.
and I think we have to play that game.
We are in much more diplomatic situation nowadays than, for example, during the times of Toscanini,
Yeah,
because orchestras are also much better than at that time. And as you say, the musicians already, some of them are even professors and have, I mean, those people are really already at a different level, where we as conductors are not their teachers anymore. At the same time, sometimes it requires us to be.
true.
And this is a difficult situation where you need to understand and have a good antennas of the situation, and know how much you can push in a certain situation. Sometimes it's enough if you hear that someone is too low to actually say a bit rounder. If you make the sound a bit rounder, you told them something that is more about interpretation, but it automatically, because they will make it like that, the sound, it will actually be higher. Sometimes it's anyways so much little change, or just dynamic. Somebody's too loud, and if you just put it a bit less, then they put a bit less pressure as a wind, then automatically the sound also settles. There are a lot of techniques where you can achieve what you want without actually putting salt in the wound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we get to these rehearsals, there is an 11th question, Boyan, which is about score preparation. And I've asked this of every conductor. Are you somebody who opens a score and quickly flicks through it, looking at the whole overall arch of the picture, and then zoom in and go in deeper? Are you somebody who listens to recordings? And when you come to mark up your scores, and I remember Yorma saying, just use pencil, but even back then I was using red, blue, and black. Are you somebody who marks up your scores with colors and lots of pencils, or are you somebody who keeps them completely clean? How do you go about learning a score, Boyan?
I have such a respect for those who can keep them completely clean.
Me too.
I don't know how they do it. Geniuses. I need to mark up my scores. I'm actually pretty not fanatic, but I am really organized about how I want my scores. And that's something that is very important to me. I do so how I do it, if it's a piece I don't know, and it's something maybe that I want to discover. I see if there are many recordings. It's fantastic because you can listen to what others do. And I truly believe that there's nothing new in music. So our shape, our taste is shaped by the sheer amount of music we have listened to. And the more we listen to, the better we will shape our own taste. So therefore, I am totally for listening to recordings.
Mm.
I find it stupid to stick to just one recording and, like, especially in the early days when you are starting out to, practice with a recording, that's not useful for a
No.
conductor. But if you are already, a developed personality musician, I think actually recordings are fantastic, and you can hear what matters to other colleagues, and you can hear hidden voices that are taken out in a way where you only could imagine. And here now you can hear it and see the result, whether it actually works. Like, for example, listening to Celibidache's Brahms recordings, where it's so fanatically taken out the Hauptstimme everywhere, where sometimes it feels like, to me personally, I mean, it's my opinion, but it feels that the other voices are almost castrated in a way, just for
Yeah, yeah.
that main voice to be heard academically, that I feel like, sure, that's the main voice, and I know it's hidden in the second clarinet, but the others have a passionate motive too, and they have to coexist. So, but it's great that you have a statement of someone who did it so that you can hear how it is.
Yes.
Because as we said, when you go somewhere as a guest conductor, you're rarely allowed to experiment. You have to have a very clear idea before you are there. And the next time you can try something out, something new, is the next orchestra, sometimes, unfortunately. So yes, I mark up my score. So what I do is I go over the score. I make first the structure. For me, my music making really revolves around structure. I believe very much in that. I think that it gives, I always call it gravity. So it creates heavy and light points, and everything composers do, whether they put a sforzato on a 2, on a 4, then it has a different way to be played than whether it's on 1 and on 3. And for me, it exists, this macro and microcosmos, in a way that bars define this kind of breathing, also overarching over bars. So you can have 4-bar structure, so it's like a big 4/4 in a way. And within one quarter note, you also have 4 heavy and light beats. And for me, so all of this, I work a lot on that also with the orchestra, and I truly believe that solves a lot of questions about phrasing, because music can be phrased in many different ways, and we know that. So does the phrase go there or there? Well, the structure will give you the answer to it, because you can compose it in a way where it leads to the F sharp, or where the F sharp falls on a light beat, and therefore it leads to another. The same melody just shifted, and you will only understand it by seeing the surrounding, and that will answer a lot of questions. So I really, my whole music making relies very strongly on structure, and this is why I love Claudio Abbado so much, because his music breathes when he used to make music, and I think that structure was very strongly present in his vision. So I do structure. Then what I do is I use colors. Yes, I use, especially in big scores, I think they help me to pop up things.
Yes, I
So
agree. Yeah.
I use red for piano, blue for forte. It's that Italian way. I know that there is also another way to do just the opposite. And I actually go through every single voice, and if there's forzati, I mark them up with a marker and the accents. So I'm pretty meticulous about that. But that helps me actually to study the score in detail, because I look at every part, and that at the end I have a very marked up score, but I do it with rulers. So I don't like mess. I cannot work in a mess. Therefore, it needs to be really structured. I need the cage in order to be free. I don't know if it makes sense, but
It makes total sense, because I'm pretty much the same. My scores are meticulously marked up. And as I've said it many times on this podcast, it helps me learn them. By writing this stuff in, I know what's coming on the next page, because I remember writing in the stuff. I remember doing it. It helps me absorb it all. And
yeah.
in moments of crisis, when the orchestra might be wobbling slightly, I can look down and there are things popping off the page at me in blue, red, or black, whatever it might be. Occasionally a highlighter marker, very occasionally. But yeah, but other people do it in a different way, and over 140 odd episodes, I've heard every way possible. But what it proves is that we all have a way that we rely on, and and what you can do that in 9 months or 9 days or 9 hours, as I had recently, where I literally had no time at all, and I just got the red blue pencil and the sharpener out and went crazy over it. For a whole program, I had 9 hours to learn it in. And yeah, everybody has their own way. And I agree
Yeah,
with you about recordings as well. You'd be arrogant not to listen to how Abado did it versus Parvayevi did it versus Furtwängler did it versus Rattle did it. You'd be stupid and arrogant.
yeah, and it will take you much more time,
Yeah.
to be honest. I mean, it's normal. Like, if you have a recording, you have such a head start already. Of course, you can say, no, I don't want to know what's around me, but that's, as you say, totally arrogant. And also, it will require much more time until, sit on the piano, figure out. Sure, now I'm at the stage where I look at the score and it sounds. But it not doesn't work with everything, right? If
Mm.
it's a new music, I can imagine what it is, but then I also need to sit down and see whether it is what it. So I really envy those geniuses who can look at it and read it, like almost like sight read it and see everything. I know there are few, and I really envy them for that. But on the other hand, everyone, important is that when we're at the rehearsal, we do our job well, and how we get there, it's our personal business. And yeah, therefore, as you said, when you have short amount of time, maybe people who do it like us have a bit of more of trouble because just of the sheer amount of manual work that is involved in the preparation of the score, that can drive you crazy. I mean, if you have a big opera score, I really go and mark up the parts, and I see where the syllables fall, and I make, like little circles around those syllables. I mean, in Puccini it can be quite tricky in the pronunciation. I mean, I'm Italian, and still, to know exactly on which syllable the beats fall and how the other. So I help myself and I make little circles, and then I know exactly where it is, and then I can pronounce it. If I can pronounce it, I can teach them how to do it. Very simple.
Are you a young conductor, thirsty for knowledge and wanting to discover more about the conducting world? Then my Patreon page is there for you. I'm constantly posting new content there based on my experiences as a conductor and as an ex-orchestral player, and I offer you the chance to ask me any question any time of the day. For instance, you might like to ask me how to mark up or learn a score, as we've just been discussing. When you subscribe, you'll gain access to interviews, video posts, tour diaries, articles, and much more. If you pay for the whole year, then you will gain a 10% discount, and if you're a student, contact me directly and there'll be a further discount. All of this can be found at patreon.com/a mic on the podium, and from just £5 a month you can gain access to this ever-growing resource on conductors and conducting. That's patreon.com. Details and links to the page are in the show notes attached to this episode. Now, the all-important 10 questions with my guest, Boian Videnoff. Boian, it is that time when we must traverse the 10 questions. The 10 questions, the same 10 questions that everyone else has answered, and therefore I always start with, what sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
Actually, I'll start with I hate. The first time I was in a London tube and I heard that noise, that was horrible. And I really hope I don't have to hear it very often
Are
because
you
it's,
talking about the wheels screeching as they come around the
yes,
corners? Yeah.
horrible. It's really like, it's painful sound.
Mm.
I don't know how people do it. This is maybe why everyone is with earplugs there and earphones, because it's a horrible noise. And what I love, I mean, I actually love silence. I really adore silence, but when it comes to noise, nature sounds are great. So having birds chirping is beautiful, and something relaxing like that. I like it when I'm in nature. I love that.
And living in Berlin and working in it often as you do in Mannheim, neither of those places are particularly. I mean, there are parks in Berlin. I mean, can you get out quickly to somewhere quiet and nature filled?
Berlin has a lot of courtyards, so many houses actually have a bedroom facing the courtyard, like in our case. And when you open we're in the middle of the city, just almost next to the opera. And you open the window in our bedroom and you hear birds chirping. So you don't have any noise from the streets. It's unbelievable.
Brilliant. Lucky you.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Number 3, if you had 24 hours free, what would you spend it doing?
I actually have lots of hobbies, and I have also a few things that I really adore. Like, for example, just I did the boating license. I really love that. So just going on the water for me, 24 hours gives me total vacation vibe. Spending 24 hours on the water resets me, grounds me, and I'm ready to go again. So this is something I really love.
I think we need something that empties our mind of musical problems, problems of phrasing or whatever else, problems of programming. People always want to know the next or rehearsal schedules. That just empties your mind. I've got a couple of, I collect watches. I love playing cricket in the summer. I've recently started playing Fantasy Premier League, which I can spend hours building teams and have nothing to do with music whatsoever. But we need that, don't we? Something that just drains the system.
Absolutely. I mean, since I'm a kid, I grew up with video games and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have much time nowadays, but when the new thing comes out, like a PS5 or whatever, I get it. And then I spend playing 3 times during the year, maybe. But still, I am very excited of VR headsets come out and I just buy them and try it out. So I like this stuff. I have, a passion for that. And I remember I wanted to do a pilot's license, but the moment I got into a Cessna during a windy day, I felt very sick doing that. So I postponed that for a while. But yeah, I am someone who can find lots of passions and hobbies also in other things.
Number 4, who would be your favorite conductor or conductors of yesteryear?
I mean, we talked about him already. I think Claudio Abbado was a wonderful musician. I love his music making. I find it incredible how ahead of his time he was in terms of actually historically informed playing. If you think of that term was not really around much, and still his music breathes, and his Mozart is so natural, and Schubert, and generally loved, and of course we all love the big master, right? Kleiber, who doesn't. These are amazing. But I think I find value in every big, even those who I don't like, then I know what I don't like and why I don't like it. And it also helps me shape my taste.
Do you remember, and I wonder which end of the table you were sitting at? I'm going back to April 2007. We all went out for a meal, and there were, 15 or 16 of us students there, weren't there? There was the guy who was running the course, Michael,
They ripped
and
us off in the restaurant, remember?
in the restaurant, yeah.
They
And
ripped us
Jorma
off.
was sitting right in the middle. And I was sitting at one end of the table with 2 Italian guys, and another English guy called Chris Russman. And I don't know which end of the table you were at, but I had a phone at the time that I could play videos on, and I was showing a Carlos Kleiber video, probably Beethoven 4 or 7. And we were all passing it around and talking about Kleiber. Of course, we were all conductively obsessed. And it went to Chris, and Chris said, "Don't pass it any further because Jorma can't stand Carlos Kleiber." I don't know which end of the table you were at. Whether you were at my end, and we were looking at Kleiber videos, or whether it never got to your end of the table.
I forgot about that moment. But
But
yes, true. Jorma doesn't like Kleiber, right?
no, I cannot remember why, but no, he definitely didn't like him. Um,
Interesting. No, I forgot about that.
Going on to the harder question, or it's proved harder for some people. Can you name your favorite current conductor or conductors?
It is harder, yes. The thing is about that there are qualities I like in everyone that I hear. I mean, I really like Paavo Järvi, for example. I think he has beautiful interpretations, and there are many. I mean, it's difficult to choose, especially when they're still alive. You don't want to take a side, and on the other hand, it's not about political, but it's just because people evolve, and I hate this fact that we're judged by one performance so often in our life. And I was myself, I remember that I was in a performance of someone and said, I don't like it. And then later it turned out I love this pianist now so much. But when I heard that concert once, I was like, and then for years I did not listen anymore, and now I am a huge fan of this person. So I think we evolve. If you listen to early recordings of someone and then later, you'll be surprised. I like music making that is natural, that happens naturally, that does not have weird, pre-planned conceptions, but where things just happen and where music breathes. And therefore, if I had to name one of them, is, for example, Paavo Järvi. I love how he does things.
I agree. I mean, Simon Rattle has said his recordings are postcards of his time here. That's what it was like then, and now it's like this now. And people do, and often people have answered this question in a repertoire specific way. You might go to a concert and see a conductor conduct a symphony of a composer for the first time, and it might not be their repertoire. They might be much better at something else. That's how it
Absolutely.
is.
Well, for example, Valery in Prokofiev, it's some of the best Prokofiev I've ever heard. I think it was Prokofiev seventh or something. I heard Valery doing. I adored that. Or Antonio Papano in certain repertoire I adored too. So it's so difficult, and as I said, we all evolve. And you might have today, you might tell, oh, did you hear this guy? And then you go and listen to that same recording that you were so in love with, and I said, oof, my taste changed, or something
Yes.
like that. So, it's hard. It's really hard to make such bold statements in a way. But yeah, I mean, one can make a statement about what one likes. And for me, music that breathes and music that has a natural flow, and this is something very important.
What is the hardest work you've ever conducted?
There is always a hardest work in a specific time.
Yes.
Of our development, right? I remember for me, conducting my very, very first concert was extremely hard. It was Bach suite, H minor suite. I mean, it's not difficult right now to conduct, for sure not. It was some Greek piece, something at that time was for me incredibly difficult. Or doing my Beethoven seventh the first time. I think recently, my last year, I had to conduct Debussy Image. That I found challenging. It has many challenging moments, and also rehearsing it, I found it challenging because it has multi-structured, multi-layered structure, which, to bring that out, not in an explicit way, like, it's like a French language. It has many letters that are not pronounced, but they're there, and they make and in a way, it's also like that with French music. There are many voices, but they shouldn't be heard too strongly. At the same time, if they're not there, the music doesn't work. So yeah, I found that complicated. Learning a difficult opera. Now I'm studying Turandot, and it's a tough piece. I'm now curious to do. I'm doing it this whole January now in Dijon, and I'm interested to see how it will go. But that's of course an experience. So yeah, at every stage of our lives, we encounter such big pieces that make us grow. I remember as a student, Matis de Mala was really tough. Yeah.
And I would go back. I conducted Beethoven 7 very early on in my career. I mean,
Me too.
Sort of concert 10 or 11, or even earlier than that. If I could go back and watch myself conduct that, then having now conducted 880 odd concerts, and conducted Beethoven 7 many times since then, I'd probably be appalled at what I did that first time. We do grow, like you've said, we all grow, we all change, we all learn things. Debussy is such a difficult composer to rehearse because, with my ex-playing hat on, nobody ever has anything really to get their teeth into. As a string player, especially, you're playing so much of the atmosphere, the mist that's around the image, rather than the image itself. But if you don't play that well, it doesn't speak as Debussy.
Yes.
It's like you said, it's those letters that are barely spoken, or they're just chopped off at the end of words, but if it needs to be pronounced correctly. And as string players, you often sit there thinking, oh, this is such unrewarding playing. But if you play it correctly, the overall picture really works, and
Yes.
which makes it tough to rehearse because you've got to cajole people into putting effort into something that really is not difficult to play.
Yes, and it requires a certain way of rehearsing that maybe also some orchestras don't like so much, because you really need to take sometimes things apart and just, okay, just this and this and this instrument, and then this and this and that, and then put them again together. And some get maybe bored about that, but if you do that work, it's very rewarding at the end.
Mm.
So there you need to choose your battles. And yeah, I found it tricky, but also to conduct. I mean, it were some technical things in Image which how to solve it when it's very slow. And do you subdivide, don't you where do you subdivide? Usually it's where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 7. When traveling abroad to conduct, what item could you not leave home without?
Mike, I'm gonna really disappoint you on this. So I'm not superstitious at all. For me, you can buy anything nowadays, almost everywhere. So there's nothing where I'd freak out if I don't have it with me. I think it's my score, but not the fact of the music itself, but because we both, as you also do it, prepare our score in a certain way. And that is my only harbor of safety in a way, especially if it's a new place where I conduct and maybe a new piece. That's something where I'd really want to have it with me. So my markings, not
Mm,
that, not the score, but my markings.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that is very specific to you personally. I don't think I've ever asked this of anybody else because I've just naturally assumed that they have a paper score. But you are a co-CEO of a company. I can't, is it called eNote or something like
Email.
that? eNote,
Yes. Yeah.
which is all about digital downloading of music.
Yeah.
Are you still using paper scores to conduct, or do you conduct off an iPad and put your
Since a
markings on that?
while, I'm on an iPad. Since a
You're
while. Yeah, I
uh,
mean, sometimes if I didn't yet have the time to mark it up in a digital score, then I might still take my other score. But usually I also scan my already marked up scores and put them in. I found it extremely useful to have the iPad. I have everything with me, and a device like that, not having those suitcases with me is just a blessing.
That's true. I mean, I'm not sure I could get used to turning or flipping the page twice more, or double the amount of times than you do
I
with a
thought
with
it's a
a
problem,
right.
and it's not at all.
Yeah.
Like, I really thought it's a problem, and I recently had to conduct Traviata again from a score because I didn't have. Anyway, I had the score, and I in performance I tapped on the paper. And then I realized, what are you doing? And I grabbed it and turned the page. It was almost such an instinct already, just tap for turning the page. It's so much more seamless, this tap. It's almost, you don't feel like you're turning pages because it happens instantly. You just touch it, and I really adore actually conducting from the iPad. Of course, some scores appear very small on it. And this is why we are actually with Eno trying now to build a device also that will be bigger, especially for such cases. But I adore it actually. It's the future. I really love it.
I think if I was your age, I would definitely go for it. But as somebody who's recently having to start to wear glasses, two different pairs, one for driving and one for reading, small print. Uh, Behind me, as you can see in my scores in my study, and on the top horizontally is an ever-growing pile of A3 scores. The bigger the better for me at the moment. So I think if I were to ever need to convert, you'd need to come up with a device that's
Yeah.
getting on for A3 size so I can at least see it.
Especially for us conductors, it is like that. It's
Yeah.
true. But for example, digital gives us other possibilities. For example, for parts, when you have a fully digital score, it's like a Word document. So imagine you can make up the text size just bigger.
Yeah.
So actually, for instrumentalists, it's fantastic, because you have a format that you can manipulate. You can change the text size, you can change the font, you can transpose, all of that those kind of things. So it is definitely the future. It just takes time to get there and to get the real equipment for professional usage. Yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Number 8. What is the one thing you would change about being a conductor?
I think what I'd really want to change is, but that's, of course, also it's just a topic, but this ritual of getting to know each other with the orchestra. It would be so wonderful if we could all meet at a level where there are no judgments, where there are no facades that we have to have where we can really work from soul to soul. This is something I'd really want to change. And this is maybe also what keeps me going on with my orchestra, because that's the only place on planet Earth where I have experienced that. And I find it so rewarding. It's such, it's a balsam for the soul to be able to be yourself and just about what you care in music. And if you're wrong, then you change it, and there is no hard feelings in it. Nobody gets offended if you try out something or say something, like where we all can be ourselves, and without having this, this very tense game of will they invite me or not, or like all of this. I really hate that, and I would love to change that if possible. Yeah.
I mean, I'm nodding away because my next two patches of work come back to back. I fly to Cologne on Sunday, and I work with the WDR Funkhouse Orchestra again, probably for about the 8th, 9th, 10th time, and then come back and go straight to Manchester and work with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra again. Both recordings, so there's no concerts involved. My point being is that I'm sitting here now and there is not one single butterfly of nerves in my stomach, because they're orchestras I've formed relationships over many, many, many years. And I know that we're at that position you are with your orchestra, where I could probably try something, experiment. Nobody would be offended. We've got the time to do that. The problem comes with the next time you go out there and it's an orchestra you've maybe only worked with once before, or it's a debut. That's when, yeah, as you said, you're starting from scratch. It's blind dating. It's, and you just have to hope that over the course of your career, you meet enough people who you get on with initially well enough for them to want to see you for a second date. Coffee turns into dinner or into lunch, and maybe lunch turns into dinner, and then dinner turns into a week away on holiday or whatever it is. But sometimes you meet these people and they just don't want to. And it's right. You're right. It would be nice to be in a position where orchestras and conductors could
Well, I
spend
mean,
time and experiment with each other.
learning how loved he was, and he was totally himself, right? And sometimes I tell myself, like, just be yourself and whatever. And I think I go more and more in that direction, and I really say, okay, if you don't like me, don't like me. I don't care anymore. But it's hard because I don't care anymore could result in, it's yeah, as you say, it might be an important place. You want to be liked, and that's already the issue.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm very much like you in the fact that I just go and I'm myself. And if you don't like me being myself, well then that's fine. I'm not going to try and be somebody else. There are plenty of orchestras out there who will like me for me being myself, and also for you, dear orchestra, who don't like me, there are plenty of other conductors you will like. That's fine. I think you have to come to that acceptance, don't you, and just realize that you'll find the people, your friends.
Yeah,
You'll find them.
yes, this
Yeah.
is true. Actually, life generally, like live it in a certain way, and life will serve you the people who are suited for that life.
Yeah.
And you'll have a circle of people that will work with that. Change your lifestyle, and you'll find other circles. It's very interesting. And still, we are also in a way somehow conditioned by our experiences we made. So if you early on, were yourself, the yourself you were 10 years ago is not the same that you're now. So making the conclusions, oh, when I'm myself, it goes wrong, is also wrong, because, well, at that point, you had certain ways of doing, now you have others, so try out the new ones. So yeah, it's a hard balance between all those things. And I think trying to be open and just share your spirit, your human soul with the people, even if that makes you vulnerable, at the end, it's what makes you being you and makes you special, and therefore it's worth it. Being loved and love always brings also at some point pain, but that pain is worth it for the amount of positive energy that one got out of the loving relationship.
Number 9 is usually what profession other than your own would you like to attempt? But you are, as I've just said, a co-CEO of an online digital music platform. So therefore, you're going to have to think of a third job. What other job might you what have wished you tried?
Um, yeah, so I mean, I really got into entrepreneurship without wanting it. By founding the orchestra, I realized that I have to learn certain things if I want to keep it afloat. Finances, like I think I'm pretty well know about taxation and how it works in tax in Germany, because it's a complex structure, a non-profitable organization. And yeah, so those kind of things I got into it. Since I was a kid, I was good in raising funds. So somehow I think I can transmit my passion for something. So if I don't believe in a product, no way I'm gonna sell it. I'm not a good salesman. There are people who can sell you whatever. You
Mm.
give them and they can sell it. They find an argument why you need it. I'm not one of those. I need to really be passionate about something, passionate, but then I can be super convincing, especially in one-on-one conversations. I'm gonna convince you about something that I believe in. I'm really good at that. So that turns out to be useful for raising, money for the arts, in both cases, whether it was eNote as investors or whether it was the orchestra for finding sponsors for the orchestra. So yeah, entrepreneurship is something that really has something it grew on me. I like it. I like to see the future. I like to work with the future, to see the ideas of people they have. Maybe I'd want one day, maybe hopefully I can in some sort, even in small ways. I know that nowadays it's possible to be like angel investor, those kind of things where I find it great to give the people the possibility to give them wings for their ideas, to see potential in people and help them, guide them. This is things that would interest me if I hopefully get to a point where I could put enough also time and effort into it, and money, of course. Otherwise, I always wanted to fly, but I had this horrible experience, so I put I put it aside. But that's something that I really adore. And I know people who had the same problem with as I have. That I mean, the Cessna is horrible. You get on
Yeah.
this plane, and it's like a tricycle in the air. So it's literally in all directions. It does like this, and you are focused on those instruments. And yeah, if you have like a delicate ear like I do, obviously, I don't know. This results in feeling sick. But that's something I would have wanted to do. Yeah, if I was not a musician.
Early doors. I mean, I'm talking way back in the beginning of the podcast. I had quite a lot of flyers. Andrew Litton, I seem to remember, wanted to be a pilot. Alpesh Chauhan definitely wants to be a pilot. And of course, I banned Daniel Harding from saying pilot because he is a pilot. But yeah, it seemed to be quite a popular answer way back when, but it hasn't appeared for quite a while. So that's good.
Interesting. I think we fly a lot, right? So we see we can relate to the fascinating experience it is. And just recently I flew from Japan back to Europe over the North Pole and seeing those views, I mean, they're amazing. So imagining of what you can see if you're a pilot or if you're an astronaut, and these are views that are granted to few, and yeah, this might be the reason.
Number 10, Boyan, is if the world were to end tonight, what would be your choice of final meal and drink?
Yeah, I think I go back to my roots. I grew up in Italy, and spaghetti al pomodoro is what makes me laugh. It's very simple, but I think that's what I like, simple things. So a really good spaghetti al pomodoro, super al dente with lots of parmigiano. And I don't know, a good, if it's the last one, why not? Then tignanello or something nice to accompany it would be nice. Yeah, I think very simple but good. Like Italians have this. The product is important. If the tomato is great, the dish will turn out fantastic.
Absolutely. You've made me salivate. It's been a while since we've been on holiday to Italy. About time we got back there and ate some of that amazing food. As I said earlier, it's been, well, it'll be 17 years this April. It's been a joy to chat to you again. We've seemed to have just carried on where we left off, probably in a bar somewhere in St. Petersburg, chatting to each other. And I hope very soon that and not another 17 years, that we get to sit down and carry on chatting like old friends as I think we are. Thank you, Boian.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, I can't believe that it was 17 years. It totally feels like we chatted yesterday. And I hope to see you soon, live in person again.
A Mic on the Podium was devised and produced by Michael Seal, with music by Ben Dawson. Next time, I will be releasing a very special episode. It is special because I will be interviewing 5 young conductors who are all studying at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in Glasgow. They do all get to answer 10 questions, but not exactly the same 10 questions as everyone else. But until then, bye-bye.